Hi, I'm Tom, and today let's talk about learning languages by reading. Now, this is one of my absolute favourite ways to learn language because the amount of vocabulary you get is incredible, but also you get to completely be involved in the flow of a language, of it just coming straight off the page into your brain. But it can be a little bit tricky. So what I want to do in this video is share some of my seven tips-ish on how you can make the most out of reading in a foreign language. Now, the first obvious question is, what do you even attempt to read? Now, people who have watched my videos for a long time will know that I'm a big fan of Harry Potter. I'm pretty sure that the plot is like seared into my brain now after having read it in French, English, Italian, German, Dutch. But the reason why it works for me is because two reasons. The first one is it's young adult fiction, so that language is a little bit easier, a little bit more simple to follow. And the second reason is because I know it so well, because I know the story now, I don't feel so guilty about skipping over stuff. So my first tip is to try and find a book or a series of books like that for you. One of the great things about reading in foreign languages is that it gives you a brilliant excuse to go back and read all those books from your past. So pick up something that you know well and give it a go in Spanish, for example. A great thing to do once you've found some books that you think you might be interested in is to go onto Amazon, find that book and use the look inside feature to just read the first 2 or 3 pages, just to get a feeling for the language and how you feel about that language when it's in a foreign language. And finally, there are things like graded readers or books written specifically for learners of languages. And a good example of that is these series of short stories by Olly Richards et al. And I've got the Italian one here, which Olly very kindly sent over to me a couple of days ago, and I've been really keen to give it a go. Now I have found the perfect excuse. So what we're going to do is dive into this book, and I'm going to take you through some methods and some ways to help you maintain that flow and to help you push through when you're reading something in a foreign language. And this is all in Italian, by the way, but don't worry, the tips I'm going to give will be relevant for everyone. And let's just start reading. Un'antica leggenda parla di un regno pieno di gente esotica, di animali e di creature fantastiche. Un giorno un cavaliere, vestito di bianco e di nero, attraversa la città più importante di quel regno. Okay, so what this is saying is that basically one day a knight turns up in an ancient, beautiful kingdom kind of thing. And obviously that's not a word-for-word translation, but that's not what we're going for, actually. It's completely fine to just get the gist and the general idea of what's going on. I think a good test is if you're able to describe back to somebody else what has just happened. If you can do that, then as far as I'm concerned, you're understanding the text and you're completely fine. Now, because this is a book written for language learners, some of the harder words have already been put in bold, and spoiler alert, all the definitions are at the end of the chapter. We'll talk about that in a minute. For now, I think it's really helpful to think about English words that you might know, or perhaps words in other foreign languages, but then something like cavaliere is a little bit more difficult. But we still have a slight in here because lots of words in any language are built on other words. So I can see in cavaliere the word cavallo, which is horse, and this ending iere is often used to refer to a person who does that thing. So given the picture on the left here, I think it's reasonable to assume that this is the word for a knight. And so using your knowledge of slightly simpler vocabulary and English or whatever other foreign languages you might speak, you can begin to make some inroads on these emboldened words here. Okay, let's keep reading and see if we can find some more things going on in here. So at the end of this page, we've also got an exchange between the merchant and the knight. Now what's happening here is that the merchant is apologizing for not having the potions, and the knight is asking how long it would take to make 2 more. But if we didn't know this, we actually get a lot of cues from the context. We can see a little bit earlier that he has asked for 2 potions. We see mi spiace, which we may know means that they're sorry. So the implication of that sentence, even if you don't understand exactly what he says, is that he doesn't have any. And so that helps us to understand, but the response is also important. Quanto tempo le serve per preparare 2 pozioni di forza? We can tell that he's asking something to do with time, using the word preparare. So his response will also help us understand the statement that was given before. And this is just another argument to keep on reading, because sometimes you might find that the context you need is actually after the bit that you're reading. So it's always good to read a few lines ahead of something that you get stuck on. Okay, let's turn the page, and I want to mention another thing that I do when I go through these books. So as I'm reading through this second page, something that I'm scanning for is verbs, nouns, connectors, and just trying to be conscious of which is which and where they are. For example, this first bold word here, sovrani, is a plural noun, which I can tell because it ends in an I and you've got day at the front. So even if I don't know what that word is, I know that the knight is working on behalf of someone or something. And something that is important to be conscious of going through this is just how important that might be. For the story, it may not really be relevant who exactly the knight is working on behalf of. And with nouns, you often do get the chance to just disregard them, which is helpful. Now, when we come across a verb, that will always be slightly more important to the meaning of a sentence. The verbs always unlock slightly more meaning. For example, down here, si tratta di. We will be able to tell if it's past tense, future tense, present tense, if it's first, second, third person, and all of that will help us understand a bit more about what's going on, even if we don't understand the exact verb that's coming up. And while we're talking about verbs, by the way, and I have completely lost count of how many tips I may or may not have given, let's call it tip 6. Tip 6 is that when you're reading a language that uses a literary tense, something like French or Italian or kind of German, a good tip is simply to not stress out about it. Because although the conjugations are different, they are often understandable. And there's a big difference between being able to understand and read these literary tenses and being able to reproduce them, which you will almost never have to do. But if you really want to get rid of literary tenses and not have them anywhere in your life, which is completely reasonable, then I would suggest trying to find a book that's written in present tense, of which there are several. All of the Hunger Games, for example, if you're interested in that. But a good source of that sort of thing is stuff like plays, for example. That is all going to be written in present tense. It's all going to be speech. That will be really helpful, a really good sort of introduction to this whole thing that we're talking about here. Okay, back to the book. And what I want to do is underline this word here, si tratta di, because I've decided that I don't understand it, that I can't work it out from context, and I'm just going to move on. But I want to make a note that I have moved on so that I can come back to it later. Now, what I would do here is take my pen and just underline it. I'm actually not going to go out and translate it or try and work out what it is. I'm just going to keep on reading and remember that that is something that I want to check at the end. Now, sometimes this isn't possible. Sometimes you might find that not knowing a particular verb or a particular noun completely kills the plot and you really can't understand. In that instance, obviously go and check, look that up in a dictionary and work out what that verb is. But if after a sentence or two you start to understand again, then it's fine to just completely move on. Because remember, this may be your first foreign language book and you're going to read more of these. So in the next book, maybe you'll get 65%, 70%, 80%, and that is how we make progress in this. So you don't have to get it perfect every single time. But when we do get to a convenient stopping point, we can go back and look at those words. Now, if I skip to the back of the chapter here, then I can actually see that all of those words in bold have been given to me here with translations, which is super helpful because now I can just go back and fill in those blanks in my head and get that extra nuance that I might have missed the first time around. Obviously, if you're not reading a book like this, then you won't have that list, but the process of looking something up in a dictionary will hopefully help to cement the word in your head anyway, so I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. However, one thing that I would say is that if you are doing this and going back and looking words up, don't feel obliged to go out and write up a list, because the words that you're looking up will come up again in chapter 2 or chapter 6 or something, and I much prefer to do it this way, where I learn the word by it being repeatedly given to me in context, rather than having a list of vocabulary that I try and learn. Now, that works for me, and you may prefer to make the list and really lock in those words before you move on. That is completely personal preference, I think. Okay, so those were my tips for reading, just going through really quickly one of the chapters from this book by Olly. Do leave me a question if there's any more detail that you wanted to get into or any questions on any of this sort of stuff. I'm going to be keeping an eye on the comments and replying to everything for the next week or so. So do go down and leave me a message if you'd like to. And if you don't have a question yourself, then go and check out what other people are saying. In the meantime, though, I did mention that there were loads of books that you can use. But if you are interested in something like this, and I know a lot of my viewers love these graded readers and love all the stuff that Olly Richards does, then I've put some links in the bottom to the books in Italian, Russian, English, French, German, there's loads of them. But for now though, thank you guys so much for watching. If you are leaving a comment, then feel free to hit that like/subscribe button on your way past. For now though, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Ciao.